Sometimes music is about more than quarter notes and rests. We need music, as well as other media like film, to help us think about and process world events, to help us better understand how school shootings, a volatile climate, a pandemic, and even the small, quiet challenges that hit people in their local communities and families, how all of this impacts our neighbors as well as ourselves. Art can help us understand. Art can help us heal. Welcome to another presentation of ProMusica Live. Rick Robinson premiered 7 new compositions this fall at the Detroit Film Theater. These world premieres explore a range of emotions from devastation to love. Toward the end of the concert, Rick and the CutTime Simfonica were joined by Kresge fellow Brandon Walley, who presented a new film created as a compliment to Rick's For Interesting Times. I hope that you enjoy the concert and the interview that our host Cecelia Sharpe had with both Rick and Brandon at DIA's Kresge Court. Tonight's show is another in a series that we started when the pandemic prevented us from hosting in-person concerts. Many good people worked on this new effort, but nothing happens without the right person at the top of the organization. Tony Ruda has been our president for 5 years. Tony has shepherded us through some of our most challenging times. So as Tony moves on to other adventures, and before we take you to Cecelia, I'd like to bring on a few people who would like to say thank you to Tony.
Tony, I raise a glass to you. Thank you for everything you have done for ProMusica as our president. Salute.
Hey Tony, thanks for everything and congratulations. It's been a great 2 years for Detroit Media Productions working with ProMusica, and we can't wait for what's next.
Tony, my good friend, I also raise a glass to you. Thanks for all you've done for ProMusica as our president. Salute.
I just want to say congratulations to Tony for a great tenure leading ProMusica of Detroit. Thank you for believing in us composers and music creators here in Detroit.
Tony, who knew that 5 years ago an invite to a Friday night concert would lead to so much? Thanks for the invite, and thanks for all your hard work.
Hey Tony, thanks so much for all you've done. We all love music, but you understand, growing an organization means connecting people with their passion and with other people. It's really about relationships, and you know that better than anybody. So thank you, mille grazie, merci beaucoup, danke, for all you do.
Congratulations, Tony, on completing your term as president of ProMusica Detroit. Thanks for guiding the organization through these difficult times, and for making Detroit Media Productions part of it. We look forward to working with you in your new role.
Tony, thank you so much for everything you have done for ProMusica Detroit, and thank you for inviting me to step out of my comfort zone and be the host for ProMusica Detroit. Congratulations and enjoy the next adventure.
Thanks, Tony. When you asked me to join the board, I had no idea how demanding yet how fulfilling it would be. It's an honor to continue the tradition of excellence begun by ProMusica Detroit 95 years ago.
Hi, welcome to Kresge Court here at the Detroit Institute of Arts. I have the pleasure of catching up with bassist and composer Rick Robinson about a concert that happened on October 7th, 2022 at the Detroit Film Theater here at the Detroit Institute of Arts. This is your farewell concert, a concert music for interesting times featuring CutTime Simfonica.
Thanks, Cecelia, for the opportunity to be here, and thanks to ProMusica for having us stream this concert.
We're going to kick things off with Model T Magic, which you performed. You were actually requested to perform during the lighting of the Sky Bridge in 2018, and you decided to write a piece for this performance that you did. Tell us about this Model T Magic.
Yeah, Model T Magic imagines Henry Ford starting up the prototype engine and basically hops in the car and goes for a ride, and then it takes off into the air, and we fast forward in time, and skyscrapers rise beneath his rise, and he flies out of sight. It's just a 3-minute piece, makes a great opener for any of our concerts now.
Now, you're saying that Henry Ford, he's in this car. Now, we have to remember that he's cranking it up.
He cranked it up. It starts self-running.
There weren't keys. You couldn't just jump in and put the key in the ignition, so this takes some work.
That's right, yeah.
Now, did he have on the aviator goggles?
You bet. And the whole Snoopy deal and the scarf. You know?
Yeah. But, of course, with a suit.
That's right.
So get your imaginations ready. Get the car running, because we're going to... right, beep, beep. We're going to kick this concert off with Model T Magic. That was Rick Robinson's Model T Magic with CutTime Simfonica. Rick, that was such a fantastic and fun piece that we heard. But a lot of the music that we're going to hear really is thought-provoking. It's music that reflects everything that has been going on over the past 3, 4, 5 years. And we're going to hear some of that music now with Let the Children Play Part 1. Talk to us a little bit about Let the Children Play.
Yes, well, the whole emphasis for the program is I was just so touched by all the tragedies we were seeing around us. And, you know, as a composer, what can I do to help society see them, recognize them, accept them, or fight against them, taking up arms against a sea of troubles, as Shakespeare said. And with music, particularly wordless music, that can be very dramatic. You know, it goes back to the Sandy Hook shooting in Newtown, Connecticut in 2012, where all those little school kids were murdered by gunmen, and the unthinkable was happening, you know, again and again, including with the weather, you know, these unbelievable situations. So in this case, Let the Children Play, Part 1, imagines parents whose only child was killed in that tragedy, and whether they rose up or whether they folded. And these parents folded, but at the end, in the coda, comes other parents who were taking Remington to court and marching on Congress to demand gun reform. And then, you know, the lawsuit against Alex Jones, who was calling their dead kids a hoax. You know, who does this? It's so un-American. And music just started pouring out for this and other reasons.
And after we listen to Let the Children Play Part 1, we're going to hear a funeral march. And this also references Ennio Morricone, the composer who recently passed away. Touch on this piece as well.
That's right. I wrote this in the summer of 2020, and so many people were dying in America and across the world, you know, weekly. And I just thought of people who lost family and friends, and they couldn't be there at the end to say goodbye. And Morricone had just been announced. He didn't die of COVID, but he died that summer, and I thought of a spaghetti western type of setting that would just be perfect. This, you know, drone funeral march, because it's like a funeral cortege, and then mentally we escape inside, remembering, you know, how we met this person or how they raised us if it was our parents, and the reality of the situation comes back again and again. There's just no escaping.
And now we're going to listen to Rick Robinson's Let the Children Play Part 1 and Funeral March. That was Let the Children Play Part 1 and Funeral March. Rick, we have another selection coming up that we're going to listen to from this concert that happened at the DFT here in Detroit. It's Romance Indeed, and it kind of talks about your relationship with your bass mom, Barbara Van Dusen.
That's right. She's been a huge supporter of me since I left the DSO in 2012, and she's been a governing board member of the DSO. We've known each other for a very long time, since her husband and her endowed the principal bass chair of the DSO. So she's kind of adopted the whole section, and we affectionately call her Bass Mom. And I've gotten to know her family quite well, so I feel very close to her. And she inspired this next tune, telling me about how she met her husband in Massachusetts when they were about the times they were in school. So I imagine these college kids meeting in the library, egghead that I am, and just having a great conversation that rambles around imaginatively everywhere. But she has this emergency. She left this book at the library and it's closed, so he volunteers to go get it for her before the first hour so she can do her thing in the morning. And so that was the deed. Okay, and it's kind of obviously a romance, so Romance Indeed, and it's in the key of D.
Here you have a musical love story composed by Rick Robinson, Romance Indeed.
Thank you. How about a bigger hand for Xin Wu and Mike Chen, huh? Wasn't that a beautiful job? We love birds. Thank you very much. Thank you, Barbara.
Rick Robinson's Romance Indeed, performed by CutTime Simfonica. Rick, who are the players that we heard in this last piece?
Well, this featured Xin Wu. He's associate concertmaster of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, and he's been playing them to my groups quite often for the last 12 years. And then Michael Chen is one of the newer violas in Detroit Symphony, and just fantastic player, and big teddy bear of a guy too. So his humor came out in there as they had those duets. But we also have Rachel Harding Klaus, who is going to switch with Xin now for the last half of the program, and she's also a DSO first violinist. And on second viola, we've got Jasper Zientek, a wonderful freelancer in the area. And Damon Coleman is a cellist from the Toledo Symphony Orchestra. And he's played with me for several years now, off and on. And Mike List on percussion, and he's been playing, nonstop for 6 years. Just a wonderful hand drummer, keeps it light to balance with the strings, but that drumming adds a lot to the ensemble.
Tell us about CutTime Simfonica and how that came about.
Well, a lot of people remember the mixed octet I started during my early tenure with Detroit Symphony Orchestra, CutTime Players. And we would do a lot of symphonic stuff for this mixed ensemble that had woodwinds and brass and strings and percussion and timpani. We'd take it to schools and churches, and that was such a big hit. But there was a smaller recession where presenters weren't paying as much. So I needed a smaller ensemble that could play in slightly smaller halls. And I'd started composing, so I wanted a string ensemble, because I know strings the best, that I could just write all kinds of crazy counterpoint for, and I know how it's going to work out. So CutTime Simfonica launched in 2010, the same year that I won a Kresge Artist Fellowship, and that just gave me more encouragement to kind of work on the edges of classical music to try to entice a wider public into classical music. And one way of doing that compositionally is to weave in some jazz and urban pop and R&B and a lot of gospel elements and rock elements into the music, so people have something familiar to ride the magic carpet of classical music. So Simfonica has been that perfect vehicle.
Rick, this is your farewell concert that we're listening to, that you performed, 6 world premieres. I'd like to ask you, what has it meant for you to be a musician, an artist here in Detroit?
Thanks. Well, growing up in Highland Park, you know, not a lot of us make the big time, but you know, and maybe I didn't either, but artistically, you know, I feel like $1 million to be able to create the kind of classical music that I think resonates with more people, with a wider audience. And that has been, you know, a big goal of my life, trying to turn people on to classical music, which, you know, is often dismissed as elitist or academic or sacred. You know, it doesn't have to be that. In 2010, I learned about the classical revolution movement that began in San Francisco in 2005, and it exploded to other places. And I started during the DSO strike to do that here in Detroit at Caju Cafe and the Majestic Cafe and this coffee house up in Royal Oak.
I remember that performance at Caju Cafe. Yeah.
Really adventurous. Just no matter what, we're going to share classical music with people. We're going to keep it lively. We're going to share some information that they learn how to listen for tension and release. The climax is near the end of a movement. You know, how do people make sense of it? So to do that compositionally has been the greatest joy of my life and the greatest contribution that I can make. And these gifts, I didn't go to school to study composition. They just came after arranging music for CutTime Players, that I picked up how to make a complete piece and make it satisfying. To start in the Detroit Symphony Orchestra and take those musicians to churches and schools and music festivals, and then to start taking them and a few freelancers into bars and clubs, I've just done nothing but grow. in Detroit. One person or a few people can make a huge difference here in Detroit. There's just so much possibility.
You talk about making a difference. You took classical music out of the hall where sometimes people don't feel comfortable. Sometimes they feel intimidated to go to the hall. Sometimes there's a cost factor, which the Detroit Symphony Orchestra as an institute has done a fantastic job of alleviating that cost factor to ensure that more people can attend classical concerts. But you took classical music out of the hall into the community, but you also helped to change the face of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, which I know the Detroit Symphony Orchestra has taken great strides to increase diversity in the orchestra. Correct me, you were the second African American in the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, and the first.
We're number two.
But the first African American bassist in the Detroit Symphony Orchestra.
Well, there was a guy. There's an Ortiz Walton story from way back in the 70s. But he was never a full member.
Okay, the first full African American bass member in the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And I know that you inspired me being able to see you in the orchestra to know that I, as an African American, could pursue classical music as a career. Talk about that change and difference that you were able to make in that capacity.
Well, you know, kids pick up on models. They look for models everywhere. And Joe Striplin, the black violinist in the orchestra who joined in 1972, was that model for me. And my older sister and brother, who played violin and cello before me, you know, let me know that it's okay for black people to play classical music. You know, our mother, who played piano and sang at the piano, she had to play classical every night. You know, she let me know it was okay to be black and play classical music. So we grew up with it in our household. But Joe Striplin really brought that professionalism home. My sister talked him into starting the Highland Park Chamber Orchestra right at McGregor Library down the street from us.
Really?
And I went to one of those rehearsals there in this room, you know, Brandenburg 3 and Schubert 8th Symphony, and I just cried that I didn't know how to play it yet, you know. So I resolved to take cello after that and got into Miss Dodge's string program.
What school was that?
Barbara Middle School in Highland Park, yeah. And that's where I got my start. But you know, it all comes down to the teachers and the permission, the parents giving us permission, you know, to do these things. And of course, the resources to have instruments. My brother went away to college and he left behind a cello and a bass. So I got to play around on those and learn to read music on Ma's piano. And everything came together when I then went to Interlochen in the summer, and then for the Arts Academy for 3 years. And you know, that advanced conservatory experience gave me a leg up when I did go to Cleveland Institute of Music and then New England Conservatory in Boston.
The journey of Rick Robinson here in Highland Park and Detroit, and impacting so many lives as a musician and a composer. If you are just now tuning in, you are watching an episode of another incredible concert presented by ProMusica, and my guest is Rick Robinson, bassist and composer, and we are reflecting on the concert with music that he composed and presented at the Detroit Film Theater on October 7th, 2022. We're going to jump back into the music, into this next piece, Let the Children Play Part 2. We heard part 1 earlier, and now we're going to get into part 2, discuss part 2.
First, I should say that the violinists are going to switch now. So Rachel Harding Klaus is going to come up and play first. If part 1 was the perspective of a parents who lost their only child to the Sandy Hook shooter, part 2 is a family, and there are 2 older kids and 1 younger kid than the one that was lost in Sandy Hook. And this is years later, and they're dealing with all the past emotions and missing their son or daughter, while also fighting for gun reform in Congress, fighting in the courts against Remington's advertising practices, as well as against Alex Jones, who was calling those shootings a hoax, believe it or not. And this is the most dramatic movement so far, and I'm hoping to write 2 more in this series because I don't think we can talk about mass shootings and gun reform enough at this point. But it's a very emotional, highly eclectic work. And there's lighter moments too where the kids are entertaining, you know, kids being kids and all very funny, but it's very difficult emotions and in music, how to deal with them, how to process them. And there are many references to other music that people, when they listen enough, will pick up on, such as Chopin's Funeral March, and I think there might be some Pink Floyd in there.
A little bit of Pink Floyd, a little bit of Chopin, all composed by Rick Robinson. This is Let the Children Play Part 2 with CutTime Simfonica. CutTime Simfonica performing Rick Robinson's Let the Children Play Part 2. This is really deep music that really touches everyone, reminds us of what is going on and brings it to life through music. What does it mean to you to write this music and to present it, and how has it helped you, or has it helped you, deal with everything that has been happening over the past few years?
Well, I think a lot of artists have felt the call to write about their experience in these unprecedented times, these interesting times. They're very dangerous in a lot of respects, and shouldn't go into that, but personally, it's let me, articulate some of my feelings and hopefully build empathy for the parents of Sandy Hook and Uvalde school shooting victims, because they are having to cope with this unthinkable, happening to their loved one. And when it's a young kid, it's all the more frightening, really. It should help us ask, well, what have we become as a country that we would let things go this far? So I hope victim families will feel heard and felt, and that Congress will listen to them, the Congress will be moved, that the courts will be moved, and the people won't put up with misinformation and dismissing people so easily.
This is Rick Robinson. We are talking about his work, Let the Children Play Part 2, during this concert presented by ProMusica Detroit. We're going to shift gears and get into another composition, Percy's Farewell. Percy was a professor at Wayne State University, a friend of yours who you met later on in his life, and he gave you your first commission. Talk about this next work that we're going to hear, Percy's Farewell, and your relationship with Percy.
Thank you. Professor Percy Moore was an ecumenical seminarian for Wayne State University, and I've met many people who've been in his classes and they just loved him and his wonderful smile and personality and wisdom that he imparted to his students. I met him playing a church gig at Grosse Pointe Memorial Church, and he walked up to me, introduced himself, and asked if I'd have dinner with him sometime. And we got together a couple weeks later, and he let me know he was dying of cancer, and asked me if I would be his friend, and how could I say no? He was a very charming man, and he had this incredible art collection and books, and just like where I grew up, we had interest in finer details and lofty ideas and psychology and philosophy. So we talked quite a bit, and I got to know him. And at some point, he asked me if I would write a piece for him. And I said I'd do it, but on the condition that I'd write it after he died. That way, the emotions would be very authentic, even though he would never hear it. And what came out, the idea that came to me, is intensely personal and mystical, and it's like he's giving a lecture, his final lecture on the grace of God and his transition to the afterlife.
We're also going to hear a work entitled Stuck, composed by Rick Robinson. Tell us a little bit about Stuck, which we all have been for quite some time during this pandemic. Exactly, and this is one of those examples where wordless classical music can, come from one area and be applied to anything else. Like the 1812 Overture was not about the American independence, right? But we've appropriated it for 4th of July. Stuck was written for Phantom Detroit, my collaboration with the Urban Requiem Project that we premiered with the poets and a jazz piano trio and the strings at Mattie Joe's Church in 2019, so just before the pandemic started. But during the pandemic and the lockdowns and all the waiting months at a time, the music took on a new dimension because it's so slow and gospel and prayerful for better times, remembering when people got together, but also suffering the pains of
feeling like we can't move because of the pandemic.
Here's Percy's farewell and Stuck with CutTime Simfonica.
Rachel Harding Klaus, Mike Chen.
This is a concert presented by ProMusica Detroit, and you just heard CutTime Simfonica performing Percy's Farewell and Stuck, composed by Rick Robinson, bassist and composer. Rick, this has been such an engaging and thought-provoking conversation and music that you have presented for us, and I'm so glad that you took time out of your schedule to come back and talk about these compositions that you composed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cecelia.
But the concert's not over. We have one more selection, the finale to the concert, and a collaboration with filmmaker and curator Brandon Walley. That's coming up after we take a little bit of time to reset. We're going to have a conversation with Brandon Walley and Rick Robinson. So stick around. We'll be right back after this.
Tito was already doing it on his own before we put a name on Love Tito's.
He used to give it away as gifts and to events, which of course included charitable events.
The culture that he has started, and it all starts with Tito himself and rolls downhill.
You know what, if we can go and take our company and support all these people that are finding meaning and purpose in their lives by doing nice things for other people that they don't even know, it makes me happy, it makes all my employees happy. Then I look at it like maybe we can make a little ripple in the world,
Most businesses really use organizations to allow them to be known, and we kind of flip-flop that. We're able to use our amazing culture around us to give them support and make people more aware of what they do.
I think that's the end goal, is to do something that has meaning and purpose.
We're here in this company to make the world a better place, and we like to think we're doing it through Tito's handmade vodka.
Rick, we're at the end of this concert that has caused us to explore so much and come to grips with so much that has been going on over a short period of time. You collaborated with filmmaker Brandon Walley on this last piece, Chaconne for Interesting Times. Talk about this collaboration. As a matter of fact, can you talk about the Chaconne itself, the music?
Well, it's a Baroque form going way back to Spain, and it might have been the blues of its time. Because it opens a player up to do endless variations in a very expressive manner, and usually built on that universal harmonic progression of 8, 7, 6, 5, which is always very naturally lamenting. This occurred to me all of a sudden, as a lot of this music has, as I was looking for other elegies to write to express, my sorrow about children dying at school, because of a shooter. And this piece, particularly right after the Kentucky tornadoes that killed so many people in one night, I was just devastated that climate change is happening so fast already. So this piece occurred to me naturally, and it was the best thing I've ever written, and I've orchestrated it right away, and that's going to premiere in April. But to have this world premiere at the DIA of this important piece, I think will bring a lot of healing and hope to people to figure out how to rebalance in the future that we see right now.
So you collaborated with Brandon Walley, filmmaker and curator, and we have him here with us. So thank you, Brandon, for spending some time and joining us on this conversation. Brandon, tell me, how did this collaboration come about?
We have a mutual friend, Nicole McDonald, who is a local artist, someone I collaborate with on film projects in the past. I think you've collaborated with her in some capacity. And I think you were reaching out maybe with her to do it. I think she suggested I might be interested. And we talked about maybe her and I collaborating on something. But ultimately, after we met with Rick and heard the piece, I thought that it would be something I would really like to try on my own as a sort of, mainly a kind of editing exercise, taking found footage, There was some things that I shot myself, but most of it is found footage that already existed, and editing that in a way that went along with Rick's piece. I was really taken with, like, kind of, as you alluded to, the repetition in the movements and the different variations, and how visually that could tell a story with kind of like human evolution and certain patterns and cycles that we seem to keep going through, and just kind of escalates, unfortunately, now towards you know, more dystopian sort of times, and, like, you know, bad things with the climate and with social justice and things like that. So that's sort of like repetition that I heard within the music. I kind of took it as a challenge to work on this editing piece, you know, for the whole film. So it was great to have the kind of the tracks from Rick, which were kind of like the blueprint for what the live piece would be, that I could edit to. So there is syncing within the different visual moods that might come up, as well as with the audio and the composition that you're hearing at the same time. So.
There's so much found footage out there. How did you go about gathering or finding the footage and figuring out what was best to help you visually tell your story?
At first, it took some pretty lengthy and, you know, very interesting discussions with Rick about just kind of what sort of visuals would they be, you know, what do we want to show visually, and the kind of arc that needs to take shape. So it was a lot of, before I even really found or I kind of knew just as a filmmaker already, like, where I could look, and within films I already have, or you know, places online, but we really needed to nail down at least what those visuals will be to tell the story, you know, to tell the emotional arc of the piece. So that was the first kind of part of the collaboration, was figuring out the kind of mood and feel that it would go to. And it was like, you know, we were doing kind of like handwritten graph charts, you know, in our notebooks, you know, about when, you know, something like, you know, the slave trade up through like civil rights movement, through gay pride movement, and all, like, where those might come in within the different variations in the movement, moving into towards the end, the pandemic, the environmental crisis, things like that. So then it was just, yeah, kind of combing incessantly film archives, both online and in person, to find those sort of images, and then editing those together in a dynamic way that made sense and was artistic, you know. So
the film is meant to bring some context and some immediacy, more than the wordless music does.
Right, supporting one another. Right. Yeah. So you talked about the process, Brandon. Rick, you talked about the process as well. How long did it take for you, Rick, to compose the piece, and how long, Brandon, did it take you to create the film to go with the piece?
All right, well, it started so suddenly, and I got right to it. It wrote itself within a week or two. And then I started orchestrating it, and that added so much elements that I brought back to the original sextet that we're about to hear tonight.
And Brandon?
When did we first meet?
I think that was April, February.
Right. Sounds about right.
Yeah. Of what year?
Late winter.
Of 22.
22, okay.
Yeah. And I was hesitant. I hesitantly agreed maybe on our first meeting. Once you sent me very soon after that the MIDI track, I definitely saw the potential, and I really wanted to do it. And we kind of hit the ground running, and just kind of the process. So it unfolded. I had a rough cut when we kind of did a preview of it earlier this year, but the final edit was the day before we performed at DFT.
Working up until the last moment.
That's how things get done.
It is. I agree.
Shaking my fist at my computer. I'm like, render faster,
right.
That sort of thing. Yeah, because part of it too, I wanted it to be timely. Like the preview we showed a month or two before that, our world moves so fast. There was events that happened since then that had to be in the finished thing. It would never be finished unless someone said, "Stop it, you're finished." You know, I would still be. There was more I would add. You know, since our performance that just recently happened. So, so it's kind of, you know, the piece ends as kind of a time capsule. Hopefully, people think about through the music and the visuals where we're at, maybe what we can do to make our world a little bit of a better place, because this stuff is still going on, obviously.
It was interesting to me how I was impacted watching the film. I listened to some of your music, you know, through the concert. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at the concert, but I was able to listen to some of the pieces you and I discussed.
You're in luck.
I'm in luck.
We're showing it tonight.
Okay, great. So I'll be sure to tune in. Listening to the music and going through the pieces and things like that, I can use my imagination. You tell the verbal story, the background behind the music, but it was something about seeing the images, and it started to, I don't mean to ruin this for anyone getting ready to watch this, but it started with a moment with the animals in the video. I don't want to give it away. And I said, Brandon, oh no, I can't look, I can't watch for what was going to happen. It's one thing to hear the music and picture in my mind, but to see the reality of what's really happening and the process that our world is going through, or that we take ourselves through, what is it that you hope how your film will impact people? You touched on it a bit, but how do you hope that your film will impact people, or people with opposing views, or how it will generate dialogue or a change of mind or heart? What do you hope?
I think it starts with being conscious of your surroundings and what's happening. I think so many people nowadays are going through with blinders, and maybe because, you know, times are so challenging, or, you know, they don't want to admit it, or they might even be exploiting a situation, you know, in a negative way. But really, to be conscious of what is happening to our planet, to the sentient beings that are on our planet, mainly is a result of what humans are doing. You know, I mean, the climate change is a human action that, you know, we all know what's happening, you know, with the summit that's happening now and everything. Like, have we even gone too far as a species? Like, is it, you know,
already too late? I
have kids. What about their kids? What about their kids? Like, this is, you know, we need to be conscious of what we're doing to the planet right now, and not be so greedy, you know, and show more love and compassion, you know. And this, yes, there's images in this film that are hard to watch, but I think that these sort of images need to be confronted. And, you know, I presented them in a way where certain things, like the point you were referencing, it does kind of jump out at you, and it's a little cringy, you know, but it's usually something people don't think of at all.
It's not.
They choose not to.
Yeah, it's not. And even when you think about devastation, tragedy, and loss, when you see it, then it really brings home the point of the impact, or what's really happening and how it's affecting us. But when you don't look at it, when you don't see it, then somehow it's just a little less real. It doesn't, out of sight, out of mind, and maybe it's not happening to me, so it's not impacting me. It doesn't matter. And I think seeing those images really shows how it impacts all of us. Yeah.
And what goes around is going to come around to everyone. I mean, the future's not looking bright, but we're going to have to find the silver linings and enjoy what's left while we still can, because, you know, are we going to be able to take fresh water for granted in 100 years from now? You know, or green parks? Are we going to be able to live above ground, you know, the way things are going? Carbon dioxide is going up, and if the heat gets hotter and hotter.
I think going to Brandon's point is making those changes. I mean, some things, it's like when you commit an act, there's consequences, and consequences are long lasting, and some are irreversible. Right. But what can we do to make the change that Brandon spoke to have more love, more compassion for ourselves, for one another, for our planet that we live on, that we can live in a better world? And whether we agree or disagree, we can respect each other's viewpoints and live together more harmoniously. That's such a great discussion. I'm glad that we were able to sit here and have this discussion and hopefully impact our viewers who are watching or getting ready to watch. Let me make sure I get this right. The Chaconne for Interesting Times. Brandon, I know that you have to go. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for, yes, thank you for creating this work, and I look forward to seeing more work from you.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back with more final words from Rick Robinson after this piece.
Where's Brandon? Brandon. Down here somewhere. All right, while he's out there. Brandon Walley.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Robinson's Chaconne for Interesting Times. Rick, thank you for bringing us such a thought-provoking concert, one that I hope will drive people to change for the better. And thank you for this, just the music. Thank you for everything that you have done for Detroit, here in Detroit. It's been a pleasure knowing you here in Detroit, and from seeing you in the Detroit Symphony Orchestra when I was a kid and actually inspiring me. You know, it's because of you that I wanted to be in an orchestra. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your piece, First Grief, when you composed that, and just everything that you've done for us and being able to build a relationship here. Definitely going to miss you, but you're not going to be a stranger.
That's right.
Okay. Because you're a Detroiter at heart.
That's right. I come back all the time. Gotta get some buddies.
Okay, that's right. Right.
Else.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. So, Rick, what is next for you in this adventure of life?
Well, I've taken this adventure to Pittsburgh recently, and getting a little closer to the East Coast. Maybe I can find some people to take over CutTime. I'm having some medical hand issues that I'm actually going to be retiring from playing over the course of this next year, but I'm hoping to move into some conducting, get more quartets and orchestras to play my music and orchestrations, and just be a full-time composer, see how that goes.
Well, it sounds like music is definitely not over for you. And if you're looking for new music, works from living composers to introduce to audiences, Rick Robinson's music is available. Your orchestra can perform it. Great music. Definitely deserves to have a stage to be performed on and for more people to hear it. So please reach out to Rick Robinson as I do this PSA for you.
Right, at CutTime.com.
All right. If you'd like to learn more about ProMusica Detroit, feel free to visit the website, ProMusicaDetroit.com. And as always, thank you for watching.